Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another of our In Conversation webinars. My name is Paul North from the UK-ASEAN Business Council, and I'm joined here by our events manager, Veronica, who's been behind organising today's event. We have a very special guest in the way of Neil Cleverly. He's the head of international growth at Twinkl, who are an organisation for teacher-created planning and assessment materials and teaching resources, and we'll have a chat with Neil a little bit later. Just to let you know that you can send in at any time questions for Neil through the question box in the lower right-hand corner of the webinar dashboard, and we will endeavour to answer those during the webinar. If we do run out of time, then certainly we can follow those up with you afterwards. But just to start by saying that we, UK-ABC, help companies of all sizes build new contacts, provide market insights, and really raise the awareness of the vast commercial opportunities in what is the fastest growing region in the world. We also bring ASEAN to the UK through a sustained calendar of events, so please watch this space. I do encourage you all to visit our website, ukabc.org.uk, where there is a huge amount of information on ASEAN, along with all our forthcoming events programme, both here in the UK and events that are happening in ASEAN. So without further ado, good morning, Phil. How are you? Hello, Neil.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, thank you very much for a very kind introduction. Good morning to anybody who's currently tuning in. So to begin with, probably best to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the organisation that I represent.
Yeah,
so
do that, and yourself and what you do, Neil. That'd be great.
Great stuff. Yeah. So I mean, I've spent the last 20 years of my life in publishing. About 10 years ago, I got into the education sector with a group called RM and TTS Group, and experienced exponential growth there. And while I was there, actually, is really where I started to see the impact and the importance of sort of turning your revenue stream away from one sole market. And I think when the old MD arrived there, his first mission was really to turn it on its head in terms of the percentage of the revenue stream coming from overseas markets, as opposed to just being beholden and dependent on just one UK domestic market. So that kind of stuck with me, really. Education is a sector I feel passionately about. I didn't really mean to get into it, if I'm totally honest. I got into it because it looked interesting, and after about 2 years, I realised just how compelling it is. You are actually making a huge difference to the education of children at the end of the day, who are the future, and that really is a compelling reason to jump out of bed every morning. So I've been in education for 10 years now. I've been at Twinkl for 2 years, working as the head of international growth. Twinkl's an amazing success story, a great startup organisation. It's founded just under 10 years ago by John and Susie Seaton, husband and wife. Susie was an early years practitioner, a sort of early years teacher, and she just found herself 10 years ago saying, I wish I could find more resources to help me teach, because I seem to spend most of my time making resources instead of actually just teaching children. And anyone who is around education knows the real value is around a teacher and how they can differentiate and interact with the children in front of them, who are all different and tend to be different year on year as well. So that's how Twinkl was born, and it started quite humbly, making resources, and it grew quite quickly. We're now at a stage where we've got 5 million users worldwide, and over 500 members of staff. So it's come a long way. And we're continuing to grow, and with that, my remit really is to make sure that we're growing internationally. So to do that effectively, it's about finding, how are we relevant to different markets around the world. And during my tenure so far, the ASEAN region has really become quite a prominent area for us, and there are a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah, I mean, you are across now all, I think, ASEAN. I know you're doing quite well in Thailand and Singapore, but you're now across. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about that exporting journey and sort of why was the region of interest to you?
I mean, the first thing is that the service we offer is an online service, so we're at an advantage compared to sort of a physical exporter. So we're not having had experience in places that do export physical goods internationally, I know that there are many regulations and things that you must sort of adhere to, and that can be quite a tricky process to navigate. Not impossible, by the way, but it just means that there are a couple more barriers. Having an online service means literally anybody around the world can become a member of ours, so that really takes the sort of barrier down. Just worth mentioning, we are in 196 countries around the world, so we sort of do have a really broad spectrum, a really great spread of members around the world. The ASEAN region started to come to prominence. Really, I think I was actually at a conference where one of the big audit houses were talking about the rise of the ASEAN, and you spoke about it earlier, Paul. The sort of the growth of middle class incomes and trading opportunities is really substantial in that region. And as we started to look across the different places, that we were seeing increasing volumes of take up, and it's suddenly became quite apparent that we weren't just trading with lots of individual countries, we were trading with what we could perceive as being actually a cohort, a whole block, really. And what we found is that many of the things that have worked in, say, we went to a trade show in Malaysia, one that was sector specific. We thought, right, we're seeing some interesting things around all of these countries in this region. Let's go out there. Let's do a bit of a recce. We used a DITC assisted European Regional Fund grant to assist us in doing that. I'm not sure if they still exist anymore.
So, yes, there is still some funding for clients that do want to get out into the market, and it's interesting, the approach there, because there is, as you mentioned, there is a lot of assistance out there for companies to get into market, and one of those ways is by going out on one of the trade missions and visiting one of these fairs and expos and getting your name out there. So yeah, carry on. Tell us how that worked for you.
Absolutely. So I think to begin with, there are big international trade shows in this country that we attended, and we managed to arrange meetings with sort of decision makers and educators from that region. So that was really useful. I do believe that you've got to speak directly to your customer wherever you can. Data is great, but actually, when you speak to someone, if you ask them the questions, they tend to tell you what they're actually thinking, and it's quite profound. It's not the most old-fashioned tactic in the world. I always sort of think of it a bit like having a shop. You would see people coming into the shop if you owned a shop, and you'd talk to them. So even if it's an online service, or if it's something that's maybe a couple of steps away, you should really endear to really listen to what your customers are saying and ask them the questions. Ask them what you could be doing, ask them what they're interested in, ask them where their pain points are. In terms of looking for assistance, we thought actually it would probably be advantageous to speak with maybe members of the Consul, or maybe members of the Chambers of Commerce in those regions. So I know that the British Chambers of Commerce helped us sort of arrange they had a bit of an ASEAN special. So we went along, and I managed to speak to pretty much every single member of the British Chamber of Commerce in the ASEAN region at each different country, which again, they've got so much knowledge about how that market operates, what kind of things you've got to avoid, what kind of things to look out for, what the sort of common themes, just really good. So you're sort of harvesting that data. And then there are, even without the ERDF funding, there are other streams of sort of investment capital and funding grants available to people who want to do market research. And so it doesn't have to be that expensive. I think the stigma of international trade is probably that it costs a lot. You're going to spend a lot of your time traveling. You're going to spend a lot of time spending money on expenses, and you're not going to guarantee sales at the end. I've not found that to be the case. I think if you can approach it quite frugally, actually, you don't have to spend a lot of money doing it. There's enough assistance there, because it's in many people's interest that we do make successful trading links with regions like the ASEAN region. So we applied for this grant, and we went out to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, which was incredible, actually. I mean, in terms of just going out there, I mean, it is just an incredible place. But in terms of the sort of people we connected with, we actually found that the trade show in the UK connected us with a better quality of customer than the trade show in region. but what we did find were good potential trade partners at the trade show. So in hindsight, I think I don't think we would have realised some potential partnerships if we'd not done that. And also the mere fact that we were making ourselves known to that region. So we, you know, it was advertised that we were going to be attending this big education event in Malaysia. Lots of people travelled from around the ASEAN region to that event. It's essentially that region's largest education event. So we started to see a great deal of interest from Hong Kong, Singapore, as well as Malaysia and Thailand, just because the literature was going out to educators to say, you know, these are the guests, these are the exhibitors at this trade show this year. And that just really helped a bit of brand awareness in the region.
Yeah, the exhibitions, just to interrupt there, but the exhibitions are quite good in as much as if you get into the regional education, the regional expos, which you did there, there is an attraction from other ASEAN markets coming in. So it is the opportunity there for you to also, you know, get introduced to organizations from other countries within ASEAN. So yeah, again, it is one of those benefits of going out, visiting the market, and getting involved with expos.
Absolutely, and again, it's good to, you know, to actually meet people. It's good to actually, you know, really get a feel for what that market is, you know, how it works. I think we did a lot of work before we went in terms of cultural competency. You know, what are the sort of elements of body language? How might you negotiate differently to how you might negotiate in different parts of the world? We actually found that it was useful to know that information, but we didn't really find it. There was nothing really prohibitive. I think a few of our people were a little bit apprehensive, sort of some of the demeanour you might have to express. Personally, I'm quite gregarious, if I'm honest, so I do tend to talk with my hands a lot. And actually, you know, being overly expressive in cultures in the ASEAN region usually are looked upon as someone who's absolutely furious. So you might have to temper a little bit of how you operate. But to be honest, it was very, very useful. It was very interesting to see and sort of speak to people out there. I think the other thing worth mentioning is that what we've found actually is that there were huge volumes of people coming from all across the ASEAN region to that one event. So I think if you do find that one sector specific event, I would recommend that you go. The one word of advice I would give is that we also thought we could arrange lots of supplementary meetings around the event in different countries, and actually, because so many people were coming to the event, they were out of office. So we couldn't actually attend. We managed to get some meetings at the event itself, but we couldn't do an additional sort of envoy around the region. So I think if we were going to plan it again, which I like to try and share, I think we probably would have arranged either some meetings a few months before or a few months after the event to really.
It's important because you have to go and visit them, and obviously that's clear because you want to see them, you want to see their organisation, you want to see how they're working. So, yeah, pulling a lot of people together is always difficult. You have to go in, particularly in the ASEAN region, you have to go out and you do have to visit them.
Absolutely. And then just in terms of the service that we offer, and you know, how many adjustments have we had to make, or how bespoke have we had to make what we do for it to be successful or, you know, applicable to that market? What we've actually found is that as a British education company, we're held on quite a high pedestal. So that's great. You know, British education is seen as world leading, which is fantastic. And as a result, I think what we've found is what we've done in, say, Malaysia. So, okay, we'll try and do this particular approach. We'll communicate in this way, or we'll get our message and our position in a specific way. And that's actually worked across that entire region. So there's great many similarities in terms of how you might want to position or present your business to that region. And you can actually do it as a regional approach, which is maybe different to other parts of the world where you might have to really differentiate quite clearly between, you know, US and Canada, or maybe different parts of South America. But for the ASEAN region, we found that absolutely we found who we are works well there. And really, it's just a case of sort of traditional marketing and customer engagement, which is marvelous. And in terms of in terms of looking at where our growth is continuing to come from, without giving too many things away, I could just say that I'm very, very pleased and incredibly optimistic about the future for us in the ASEAN region. I think it's a really, really exciting area of the world right now.
It is. It's the fastest growing region in the world, and will be the fourth largest economy behind China, the EU, and the US in probably the next few years, to be quite honest. So it is that place where it is all happening now, and it is, as you have found out by going there and visiting the market, it is an easy place to do business there. And a lot of the countries, if you look at the ease of doing business, World Bank ratings, a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia are a lot easier to do business than the US, China, India, and some of the Gulf states. So it is an area there of particular interest, and we're here really to push and build up the awareness. And obviously that's brought a lot to your organization. You have 500 staff and 5 million users. I mean, it's fantastic growth in such a short time. I just wanted to pick up a little bit about visiting the market, because talking to potential distributors and support organizations there, it is about gaining that trust with the potential clients and distributors that you are working with. You've mentioned the amount of assistance that's available, not just here in the UK, but also out in market from the British Chambers of Commerce, who are also our in-country partners. What we do find with some organisations is that they don't always realise that some costs have to be factored in there.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could give some advice there to companies who are going into market, what they need to factor in as regards some costs, and in particularly, because this does come up, how do they justify that with the management?
So I think what we have found is that any of these things are management will often say this, what's the return on investment? When are we going to realize this? And obviously you would ask that question. You're not going to go and visit the region, come back, and then immediately make sales. I think that's really important to stress. The relationship building piece is the same around the whole of the business world. So I think going out to the region and actually making sure you get the appointments with the right people. So if you can get any assistance from maybe the ASEAN, UK-ASEAN Business Council, or the local chambers of commerce, or even just reaching out through connections within the sector. LinkedIn's very, very useful in this respect as well. Making sure you can go out. I think meeting face to face and just starting that relationship is great. If you meet face to face with someone and you've gone all that way, it almost gives you the license that you can then meet digitally after that event. In terms of how long might it take for you to realize realize the return on investment for going out to that region, in my experience, it could take 6 to even 12 months to sort of begin to get something moving. But once it's moving, it tends to, it's like the hard yards are at the start, basically. And once you've done that, it then becomes a lot easier. And like you said about the ease of trade, actually, I think it's just really making sure people know that you're there, that there's a relationship with somebody, if it is a distributor or another partner in that region, that you've got the trust and that relationship is sound. And then, I think I'm trying to think about the unexpected costs that we incurred. So, I think that the travel was reasonably was fine. I think the accommodation and things like that were okay. Actually, I think it was the event, to be honest. I think we ended up wanting to do more at the event than we'd anticipated. And there's a few little teething things like the logistics of where do we store this material that's going to go on an exhibition stand. And we ended up hiring a hotel room to store some materials in, almost like a very deluxe lockup. And actually a couple of technology things, such as making sure you've got the right plugs and you've got the right, because you can't just nip out to sort of Sainsbury's and go and grab a 4-way adapter here and there. So just someone who's quite meticulous in terms of planning all of the sort of finer detail. That would be my advice, really. And I'd say that yeah, the once you've been and actually made that contact, also find that a lot of the people that you've spoken to probably do come and visit the UK maybe once a year. So again, it's just making sure that you can keep that relationship going. And you could be talking about only having one trip out there in 2 years, but actually building some really solid network connections.
Yeah, and I think as we mentioned before, a lot of companies I see will just go out there and try and do it themselves and talk to organisations which might not bring them anything in at the end of the day.
Mm.
But as I say, again, a lot of help out there, not just with the British Chambers of Commerce, the Department for International Trade are also there, and you're in one of the major high value sectors across ASEAN. So in every country across ASEAN, education is a priority sector for those to build and develop, not just also the education side that you're in, but also into training and vocational training and stuff like that. So it is a huge factor there. But I mean, it all sounds excellent, all sounds very good. You've had a great growth in that region, but there must have been some challenges, Neil, good and bad. I mean, tell us about those.
So I think in terms of the challenges that we faced, I think it was really knowing what to do with that interest. Sort of how much should we pursue it to begin with. I think we probably looked at it for a little bit too long rather than reacted to it. So we did end up making connections with different people like yourself, Paul, and like local chambers of commerce and sort of like audit houses and such to talk about, what opportunities are there, and sort of really researching what kind of, where is education going in that region, and culturally what is significant about it, and why should we be seeing sort of the semblances, the shoots of growth there. I think obviously Hong Kong is quite tense at the moment. It's probably underplaying it somewhat. I think what we've found is that there's a differentiation between that region and China, although there is a little bit of crossover in the south of China. And I think we constantly have to be mindful of how we sort of presenting ourselves into that region, whilst also not becoming politicized and not being political, and making sure that we are a service provider and we are very sort of agnostic about our approach. I think that's a challenge that never goes away, if I'm totally honest. I think the greatest challenge is really making sure we're really on top of the cultural competency piece. And for that, you do need people who are experts in the region to converse with, and you also need people that you can trust and speak to in that region as well.
Yeah. It might be a good idea to come in and just, we've got a couple of questions that have come in, Neil, which I think are quite apt at this moment in time when it comes to the challenges. I've got one question here that's coming from Daniel. He says, obviously you've been successful there, is there a case for Twinkl to have a local presence? And if so, what would that look like? How would that shape up?
That's an interesting question. So, to be honest, I have looked at it. I think because of the nature of what we offer, it's not something that I'm pursuing at this moment. I would say that it's relatively, having looked into it, it's relatively easy to set up a local presence, maybe in Malaysia rather than Singapore, because it's cheaper to do that there, and actually you can position yourself quite close to the border, and both of those countries are particularly exciting. For us, it's about a dedication to the customer service and connection with our market and with our educators. So at this stage, I don't feel that we need to have that local presence, but we have a local presence in that we have a dedicated set of people thinking and reacting and working towards the customers we have in that region. So we've sort of got a digital localized presence. If you were considering having a localized presence because it would give you the ability to host meetings, or maybe have it as a sales hub for field-based reps to go out from. Certainly, I've spoke to quite a few companies who've done that, and they've found it very easy to set up and quite successful for their business. Just don't feel that it's correct for ours at this stage.
No, and it doesn't necessarily have to be yourself. You could have a partnership with an in-country service provider as well that could do that for you on your behalf.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's just take another one, Neil, that's coming, which is, again, quite interesting, because I know where you're coming from and what you're doing, but there is a question here about language. Have you had to do any language change for your information that you're giving out there, and has that been a barrier?
No, it hasn't at all, which is probably one of the more surprising things. So English is taught quite widely around the ASEAN region, and I think it was quite recently that Vietnam decided they were going to teach English as their second language rather than Chinese. Now, read into that what you will, but that is a sort of indication that you can trade using the English language in that region. And actually, we're offering materials. A great majority of them are in English. I mean, we do translate into about 13 different languages, so we do have a wide remit, but we don't translate into Malay. So, yeah, language doesn't have to be a barrier at all, in my experience.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. So, I mean, the half hour is disappearing here, Neil. It's great to have a chat with you. So, I mean, we've spoken a lot there, but let's just look at your 5 tips, top tips for advice for organisations, exporting companies wanting to pursue those opportunities in ASEAN.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is I would find a sector-specific event, maybe to attend in person rather than actually exhibiting at. I would also then look for potential partners, other people within the sector, or potential customers through social channels such as LinkedIn. Try and make some connections to begin with. I would speak with someone like yourself, Paul, or the local chambers of commerce or the Department for International Trade, and see what things are available in terms of, there may be trade envoys or trade missions going out there. There may be the reverse occurring, so you may find delegates from the ASEAN region coming to the UK. Absolutely get in touch with the people who are around. There's such a wealth of knowledge that you can pick up from the services that are offered. Don't be shy of putting together a sort of a grant application and actually going out there and doing a recce. And lastly, is actually go for it. It's looking at, I'm currently working around pretty much every country in the world at the moment, and I would say that this region is certainly has fewer barriers for the majority of exporters that I can think of. So my final piece of advice would be, really, really seriously consider going for it, because if you're a British-based company especially, you're probably already at a bit of an advantage.
Excellent. Good. Now, some good tips there, Neil. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been fantastic. We could really, I think, carry on for another half an hour, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, all our time is precious. But I hope that's given our delegates who are listening in today some good advice on what to do going forward into ASEAN, just not in the education sector, of course, but also in other sectors across the marketplace.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Paul. And just to say to the delegates dialed in, if there's any further questions or if you wish to connect, please don't hesitate. Just drop me a message, and I'm happy to come back and answer any questions at later dates.
Excellent. That's brilliant, Neil. I mean, I've popped your details up there on the screen for people to see. I just wanted to just finally say thank you very much for everybody who's been listening in today. Just to let you know that we do have another conversational webinar on the 11th of December. It's an export bridge to the ASEAN markets. We will speaking to a couple of colleagues from a company called Asian Market Entry, who pride themselves on the ability to help UK technology companies successfully expand into the ASEAN market. So another sector-focused webinar there. So Neil, many thanks again. We will speak again very shortly. Thank you everybody for listening in today. I do encourage you again to visit our website, UK-ASEAN.org.uk, and have a look at the events and all the information that we have up there on the website. So that is the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, and speak to you all again soon. Bye.